Welcome to the Experts in Sport podcast, brought to you by the School of Sport, Exercise and Health Sciences at Loughborough University. Today I'm with Dr. Claire Madigan, and we're going to be talking about weight management strategies, including the use of weight loss drugs, the importance of behaviour change, and finding a way that works for the individual. But before we do, Claire, can we hear from you a little bit about your career and an introduction?
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. So my name's Claire. I completed my undergraduate in sports studies, and when I got to decide on my final year project, I could choose health or sports performance. And so I focused on using the dance mats as a way to increase physical activity in children to try and reduce obesity. So that really started my career in weight management, and I then went on to do a master's in nutrition, physical activity, public health, and I was lucky enough to work in public health, commissioning weight management services, so really understanding how we can get things implemented. And I wanted to make sure that everything I did was evidence-based, so then I completed a PhD in behavioural weight management interventions in primary care. And after that, I went to the University of Sydney, where I was in the Bowden Institute, which was everything to do with obesity, diabetes, nutrition, eating disorders, and ran some clinical trials for weight management, both drug trials and behavioural. And after that, I came back to the UK and went to Oxford, and now here at Loughborough. And I'm still focused on weight management. We recently published a great review in the BMJ on what primary care practices can do for weight management. And my focus now is more on implementation and looking at whether we can help people lose weight before they have surgery. So it's great to talk to you guys today.
Nice to hear about that. So there's quite a few similarities with some things here. So I did my undergrad, and I had that choice of health or sports performance. I went sports performance. I actually had a job in sports performance and didn't like it, and actually kind of gone more full circle around health and fitness and general population type stuff. And then interestingly, I heard you talk there a little bit about the public health space, and I'm now researching some bits into policy and children and things like that. So we could probably talk about that lots, but we're not here to talk about it today. We're here more to talk about behaviour change. But in the news at the moment, there's been quite a few things out there about, the pharmaceutical companies who've been chasing this magic pill to sort out, change, challenge and stop the obesity problem that we have around the world. And the papers would probably tell us that it's finally arrived. Is that the case? Has the magic pill finally arrived?
Well, it has been exciting times in this space, because there has been 3 drugs in particular that have got in the press lots with celebrities using them. One is known as Wegovy, which is also semaglutide, and another is tirzepatide. I'm always not very good at saying drug names. Yeah,
I'll leave you to that one. I'm not going to correct you on any of that.
No, so both have had really good results. So there's around 15% weight loss roughly a year. They range in 56 to 72 weeks. And it's about, I think, 13% more, maybe 13 to 15% more than the placebo arm. So they are great. And they have recently come out. And we did have orlistat before. And in comparison, that resulted in around a 10% weight loss a year, roughly. So they are bigger weight losses, which is great.
And that's bigger than placebo, but it's also bigger than a lot of the other attempts that people have made. So I know a small amount about exercise referral, and I'm thinking that was around 5% type of results. Is that around the right numbers?
Yeah, exercise referral most probably is lower, but the behavioural weight management program, so things like Weight Watchers, Slimming World we have in the UK, or that involve a 500 calorie deficit, some recommendations for physical activity and support, are around 5%. So on average anyway, at the end of the program, and then at a year it most probably drops to about 3%.
And is that the very low calorie diet? Where are they at? Are they?
So very low calorie diets. There was a great trial that was run in Oxford when I was there called Droplet, and they had around a 10 kilo weight loss at a year. And the follow-up, people do regain, and we'll come on to that in a bit. But so very low calorie diets do work. It's just not everyone wants to.
There's so we could go so many places with this. So let's go and focus a little bit on the drug side of things. So in these trials and how they're going to receive these drugs, what is it that people are doing? Is it just take a drug and it's magic and literally has been invented, or is there more to it than that?
That's what happens in the papers, or according to the papers, they say, oh, we've got this new magic drug, but actually there's a lot more into it. People do need to change their diet. They do need to change their physical activity for those drugs to be effective. There was a great, my professor was involved at Sydney in a drug sibutramine that's now being taken off the market. So it helped with weight loss, and it was found it was helpful for weight loss, but it had more cardiovascular events. So people had cardiovascular problems, so they got withdrawn. They had a great graph which showed that if you just took the drug, you lost like a little bit of weight, maybe 1-2 kilos. But if you had the drug and the physical activity and the diet support with someone meeting with you, then it worked much more effective. And all of these trials that have completed, the drug trials that have resulted in 15% weight loss, have weight management support with them. So both groups, though, get them. So the placebo gets them and the intervention get them, and they have either a dietitian that they see maybe on a monthly basis that recommends a 500 calorie deficit and physical activity. So they all have this behavioural weight management. So for the general public, you can't just take a magic pill. It most probably won't work. You need to make the changes as well. And then this enhances the changes and makes it easier for you to adhere to them.
And it's not just making the changes, it's having the support from people and from experts who can help you with the diet.
Yep, definitely. And we did a review not on on drug trials, but we did it on behavioural weight management interventions that could be delivered in primary care. So some of those included very low calorie diets. And when we did a subgroup analysis to look at whether the number of attendances or number of contacts they had, we found that the minimum people needed was 12. They needed 12 contacts, and that resulted in greater weight loss.
And is that 12 contacts one weekly, or was that yearly? So is that one a month? Was it one a year, or do we not know what's best?
It varied. So most were, I think, some were once a week, and some had over a longer period of time, so once a month and things, but it had to be 12. And because we were pulling together the studies, we couldn't look at that individually. So the contact and the support is really important.
And so it's the contact with the people. Have you got other studies of people trying to do this alone with the drug, or do we not know any of that?
Well, there's not, some of the drugs aren't available on the NHS, and in the NHS for weight management, we have different tiers of treatment service. So your tier 1 is your general public health advice, eat less, move more. And then your tier 2 is your behavioural weight management program. So you might get referred through your doctor, or you'll be able to self-refer, and that's like Weight Watchers, group support generally, or now online programs actually. But again, we don't know whether they are effective yet. And the drugs would most probably have to fit in the tier 3 system because they have to be medically administered and they need the support. So to get those drugs even implemented with the NHS would be quite difficult, because the tier 3 services throughout the UK are multidisciplinary, and they vary, and it's a bit of a postcode lottery about whether you get it or not. So actually implementing these drugs is going to be also one of the problems, because your GP is not going to be offering you weight management advice with the drug. So how can they deliver on it?
Yeah, that's a good wider issues. And I mean, question that you may not know the answer to here is it going to be available to children, or has it been done with children?
It hasn't. Well, when we were in Sydney, we did it there's a genetic condition which is horrible called Prader-Willi syndrome. And that means that when you were born, you failed to thrive, and then you have this appetite that is uncontrollable. You eat from bins, you grab food from anywhere, and so they have very low muscle mass as well. And so children put on a lot of weight really quickly. And if you don't get the growth hormone, which helps with the muscle mass, then it's very difficult. So we did try it in children in that specific population, but I don't think it has been tried in children out in a general population yet.
Okay.
I might be wrong though, so there might be.
Okay. And so you said tier 3, does this carry on to the gastric band type surgery things as well?
Yeah. So tier 4 would be your gastric band. So that would be, and some of the results, of the drugs are showing that actually they're similar to gastric band. And you've just got to, as an individual, you would have to weigh up the side effects. So the side effects of the gastric band and also, the side effects of these, drugs, GLP-1 drugs, because most of the side effects are, nausea, gastrointestinal problems, and if I remember rightly, I think it's around 30% more were reported in one of the trials that participants in the intervention, so the ones who were receiving the drug, had more of these problems. So you have to weigh up the side effects for you and also the long-term side effects, which I don't know whether we know as of yet.
And so at the moment it goes through these levels of tier 1, 2, 3, 4, and behaviour change seems kind of central from that tier 2, 3, 4 to any potential change. So what kind of support are people getting in that behaviour change? And can you talk us through kind of the behaviour, whether it's the behaviour change model or what's going on?
Yeah. So one of the main things we know with weight management is self-monitoring. That's one of the techniques we know that is effective. So most programs involve you monitoring your diet somehow. So there be filling food diaries in, and we have a goal that is set. So our dietitians, when we were doing the drug trials, they set them goals of a 500 calorie deficit. They would come in with their food diaries, evaluate where they're at and how they've done, and then suggest more changes that they could be made. So self-monitoring was one. We also weighed them regularly. So if one of the things that people say is important is that when they attend group programs like Weight Watchers, it's being weighed in front of the group leader because they don't want to let the group leader down and they don't want to show that they've put on weight. So weighing regularly is also one of the important things. And having group social support is also another thing people report too.
There's a couple of interesting pieces there because as some of our listeners know, I own a gym, so I know I've said this to many other people. I'm knowledgeable enough to be dangerous is what I would say. So the NHS side, food diary, what are we using an app? Are we using it in paper? What are we using? Yeah,
well, this was when I was in Sydney, so it wasn't NHS, but and most of the programs aren't really run in the weight management programs aren't run in the NHS. They're more commercial or social enterprises. We've got a great team of Birmingham from Gateway Family Services that run their own program. So it does vary. Most now, because of COVID, are moving to online apps as well that support their group based. So I know Weight Watchers has a point system that you can monitor. And we were going to do a great trial with them to look at how we can increase adherence to that, because monitoring it diminishes in time because people get bored of it. So you need to make it easy and sustainable.
And is MyFitnessPal used at all?
I love MyFitness.
We're not the BBC. We can talk about it because I love MyFitnessPal as well. That's what we use in our gym, and it works. And they can track it to friends. Which again, accountability to friends, or our coaches can kind of oversee what they're doing. It seems to work quite well.
Yeah, I use MyFitnessPal, and if I recommend it to anyone because it's free and it's easy to use and you can barcode. So yeah, most of the other programs tend to have their own, but I'm sure, it's very easy to use.
And going from memory, and this might be totally wrong now, so as I said at the start, we have lots of things we could talk about. So I ran a personal training studio in Sydney, and it was a thing called Calorie King back then. I'm talking 15 years ago. It was in Australia, and it was pen and paper type stuff to start with. But Calorie King was just kind of coming on the scene in America, in Australia. So I don't know if that carried on. That was quite good at the time. I don't know if MyFitnessPal may dominate everywhere now. I guess.
Yeah. Our dietitians were using paper-based, but quite a lot of our participants participating were retired as well. So they didn't want to use tech. They were happy just to write it down. But I think it makes it easier with MyFitnessPal. You can just record it so easily. So I think most probably they're all going towards it now.
Going towards online and that way. Most people are. So you also talked about the kind of behavior change type models. So we're kind of moving forward to the individuality of some of this. Is there kind of standard models that you're using on behavior change, or is this more kind of counselling and individualised, or a bit of both? Where is that?
Yeah, I think when some colleagues did a review of all the different behavioural weight management programs, and they found that most of the content is the same. So it generally, people have groups, they have a calorie deficit, they encourage physical activity. They most probably don't do the physical activity as well as they should. And so most have the same components. The online ones all say they're different. So Noom is a popular online one at the moment, but if you drill down, it's everyone's trying to create healthy habits and change the way we eat. So they do tend to have the same. And that's most probably what happened within the drug trials too, because they were given standard advice for calorie deficit and usual care. But what we haven't talked about is what happens after they come off the drug, which is the interesting thing, because in one of the trials, I think they regained around, at the end of 56 weeks is when they measured, and there was this great weight loss percentage weight loss of 15%, which is amazing. But then they followed them up for another 56 weeks where they didn't have any support, they didn't have the drug, and the intervention group then put on 13 kilos, so on average, it's massive.
Yeah.
But the benefit is that there's still a difference, because we always compare it to the control group, because it does vary. So we compared it to the control group, and there was still a 6 kilo difference. So there still is a difference, and it is still positive, but they do regain. So either people have to stay on the drug, or we have to find a way to help people maintain weight loss. And I think that's the one thing we haven't cracked yet, is weight loss maintenance.
That's a big point. I mentioned to you before, and again with the gym, we always talk to people and friends or anybody, obviously being around this, people always ask, how can I lose weight? And my favorite mantra is, it's really simple. It isn't easy. And there's a huge difference between simple and easy. So in simple terms, and sometimes people don't like the kind of calories in, calories out type kind of advice, but simply that is there, and to be pretty accurate, yet it's not that easy to do. And some of these things, like you've mentioned around tracking, can be self-accountability, being with a coach or a group, it's adding that accountability around it. But we always talk about, look, if you want to do this for 4 weeks, you do it for 6 weeks, do it for whatever, that's easy. But it's the maintenance phase that's hard. I mean, we talk about long-term goal setting. So we might talk about process goals, we might talk about short-term goals and monitoring that. But if I sit down with somebody who actually wants to do this properly, because friends often don't really. They kind of ask, and they, what should I do? I stop eating chips every day, or whatever. Stop drinking too much. That's probably the main one with my mates. So if you actually want to do this, come and sit down with me and we'll have a chat. And I'll always say to them, right, if you could be the fittest that you could imagine right here, right now, what else could you do? And I've sat down with people. This came from Australia. I'm stealing this from, again, not BBC. So Vision Personal Training was great for me. Learned a lot from them. And my mentor at the time, a guy called Mark Kaplan, who now runs another gym called Tribe Social Fitness, again in Sydney. They were absolutely brilliant on this. And it was all about the long term. And it was like, look, you can get that. Like, we didn't even need to worry about getting there. It's the maintenance phase. And it's like, what can we do now that's going to keep you going? And I'd have people in there, and we always used to ask them what exercise they liked or didn't like, and they'd say, so many people say, I hate running. They'd always say it. And then they'd start to lose some weight, and then they'd start running. And seriously, I could go and show you people on Facebook now of people who came in. I know a guy in Australia we work with, lost 40 kilos, And I don't know how many marathons he's run now. He's done ultra marathons, and this is 15 years later. I still see him on Facebook banging out marathons and stuff like that. And you just think that's amazing. Once they get that, and I'm wondering out loud really now of whether the nutrition and the social support, and it's people in the gym as well where we were then, but also that additional goal. And you mentioned a lot of these aren't combining the exercise. So is that the missing ingredient here?
Yeah, some might do, but the majority focus on the diet, because you can't
outtrain a bad diet.
You can't outrun a bad diet.
Yeah. Definitely true.
So you can't do that. So the diet is a focus. But we know in the US there's this great study which is called the National Weight Control Registry, which is a study that follows people up who have lost large amounts of weight and they've maintained it, and some have maintained it for 20 years. So it's really positive, because most people are like, oh, most people put the weight back on, they regain it. But actually some people can keep it off. And I think we've got to remember that, and we can strive towards that. And even though we've got an environment that does promote lots of opportunities to eat and be less active, so it does make it more difficult. And what they do is lots of physical activity. So they report that they do lots of physical activity to maintain their weight. They weigh themselves regularly so that they can identify small lapses and do something about it. So so physical activity might be one of the things we need to get people doing. And as you say, once you lose the weight, it's actually much easier to be physically active. But when you've got a lot of weight on you and you have to carry it around, I'm pregnant at the moment and I can feel the weight carrying on. So yeah. I could definitely feel it.
Well, it goes back to that again. It's simple, but not easy. And you know, that first step is really, really difficult. And there's so many reasons. I've seen a picture before, and I can't remember where it's from, of all the kind of factors for obesity. And do you know the picture I'm talking about?
The Foresight report is the map of...
Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. It's incredible. When you look at it, you think, wow, this is so complex. And when I say I've got enough information to be dangerous, you know, I've been around this a lot. But, you know, even someone like me who's been around it a lot and works in kind of this space and has the gym and all the rest of it, I still look at some of that and go, wow, like digging down to some of that individual level. But when you talk about this tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, tier 4, you know, most of the people who are coming into our gym are probably tier 2. Those who are looking to lose weight, maybe tier 3. But the complexity of them, you know, probably the most extreme cases are the ones that, you know, are going to the GP, and they're the most complex, where the map that we're both talking about. And what was it called again? So those who haven't seen it, what's the...
So it was back in 2008, Susan Jebb did it, and it was the Foresight Obesity Report. And it's a system map of all the factors that can influence weight gain. So it goes from your psychological to your environmental, your diet, physical activity, individual behavior change. It's huge. And the food system, like the food systems and where we get our food from.
Which actually totally goes against my mantra of it's simple, not easy, because it's not actually simple either, is it? But let's not dwell on that.
But yeah, no, I still agree, though. There are some things we can do, but there's just so many environmental pressures. And I think these drugs are amazing and they're really good that they can help people who have struggled. But we do need to, the public need to remember that you have to put the work in. You can't just take this drug. And also we need to find a way of maintaining it if we don't just carry on, because the drugs are going to be expensive to the NHS as well.
And what does the drug actually do? I didn't touch on that at the start. I was meant to.
So it suppresses appetite and delays some of the emptying of the gut, so you don't feel hungry as much.
So feeling fuller for longer and not wanting to eat. Is that similar for gastric bands? I know gastric bands you can't eat as much.
You physically can't eat because they've taken it away.
Because I had a few members that I trained, this was back in Australia, who had gastric bands, and many of them, they just end up eating rubbish because they couldn't get enough calories in, and then they end up going in and having them changed so they were bigger so they could actually eat more.
Yeah, there are some side effects. I'm not the expert in bariatric surgery, but we did have, so when I was in Sydney, we had part of the clinic was for people with a BMI of over 50, so they were waiting for bariatric surgery and stuff, and so at that point it kind of needs to be bariatric surgery, but they do some put the weight back on. Some do maintain it, and it's great. And they do lose a lot of weight quickly, but you just have to also, there's excess skin available, just so there are some side effects. And some people manage to cheat the system and use liquids rather than foods, so then they can put the weight back on. But part of the bariatric service and going through it, you have psychological support to help you overcome some of those things that you may be facing as well.
So there's all those factors that come in, and looking at the map around all the complexities of this, and the social support and the exercise and the nutrition. But as we've just said, the starting point for weight loss would be the nutrition side.
Yeah.
Ideally with these additional support kind of mechanisms in place, whether that be, if these people listening now need to lose weight, then, it's not necessary that you have to go to the doctors and go through this stage 1 or 2 or 3. Getting started with something like MyFitnessPal and some social support and speaking to your friends and just my friends probably would just laugh and be like, not whatever. But, find those friends. We talk about circle of influence. Yeah. And having those, the 5 people who you spend the most time with, and trying to get them on board and being serious about this and going, look, it's from health and I really need to do this. I want some support. So instead of saying, oh, let's go down the pub or let's do this, we'll go for a walk, do something different. And we touch upon all those kind of sides of things. So you don't have to be going to the GP and waiting till you get to a certain size or certain problems. You can start to make some of these changes now. I think we touched on the maintenance side of things as well. Exercise being really important. I did a podcast. I don't know. Do you know Danny Longman who's here? I did a podcast about evolutionary biology. And it's interesting you mentioned physical activity earlier, because when he starts talking about the amount of steps that we used to do compared to what we're doing now, and everybody, we can get onto the 10,000 steps piece, which, is helpful and can help people. But actually, if you go back to kind of what we were born to do, me and you are sat here now. Actually, this is a stand-up desk. We should be standing up. And we're sat in my office talking through this. So even us who know these things, we can still kind of cause these problems. But it's a lot of these things that need to come together to help people to move it forward. So when you're looking at, you mentioned environmental factors, and we talked about policy and things like that earlier. So we know this is an issue, and what we're currently doing, or what you're currently trying to do, is trying to help solve this issue. But how do we stop this becoming an issue?
Yeah, I focus mainly on the individual behaviour change and weight management, and offering kind of treatment services. But I think what the key is prevention. So unfortunately, this government doesn't seem that interested in it at the moment, which is really sad, because there were things like they were going to stop advertising of junk foods to children. And the sugar sweetened beverage tax is one of the kind of flagships of public health that has worked. The industry reformulated their products, so there was less sugar, and people didn't stop drinking as much, so it didn't affect the company's profits. So actually, it worked out. Well, ideally, you wouldn't drink any sugar sweetened beverages, but at least people were drinking less at a population level. So I think if we could do more public health level stuff, one of the other things I've noticed, I've got a 4-year-old that's just started school, and the lunches are terrible. I was so sad.
They are bad. And I kind of have to bite my tongue in it with the kids a little bit. And interestingly, we've got some of the podcasts, so that the 3 R's, looking at rewarding and reoffering and things like that. So how to get children to eat more vegetables. And there's been some cool campaigns, some publicity campaigns that I think they're really kind of eat them to defeat them. Have you seen that campaign? So the Eat Them to Defeat Them campaign is all about, you've got to eat the vegetables to kind of save the world. And the guy who's leading that is a marketing agency. So it's all kind of really cool characters and things like that. And I think he's trying to get it into some cartoons and stuff. And my kids had heard of it, which I was quite happy with. And the kids seem to be really excited about kind of eating these vegetables to defeat, stop them taking over the world, I think it is. So I do think things like that, like the communication of this to children, is needed. And obviously, like Jamie Oliver campaigned for ages about this, and then I don't really know what happened or whether things did happen or not. And so if even he can't make things happen, this is difficult.
Yeah, I didn't realise how bad it was until my 4-year-old started school, because they have a So in the menu, they offer fruit and yogurt every day for pudding, but they also offer a biscuit or a cake, and they might have a cake which has some sort of fruit in. So that meets the food requirements or the Food Standard Agency, the nutritional requirements for school. So they're meeting it, but actually kids are never going to choose the fruit and yogurt. My 4-year-old was like, I chose the cookie. And he also gets it at the same time, so he eats the cookie first. And I tried to, when he first started, I was like, okay, I'm just going to tell them that he's only allowed the fruit and yogurt. But I felt so bad with him starting school, new system, and then him being different that I reverted that. So I did email the principal and asked him, can we do something about this and just stop the desserts? Why have we got them? But there wasn't much changes. And then I did email a colleague and say, what can be done? Because actually in Scotland, the school food requirements are different. And so they've got a very good theory about energy dense, nutrient poor food. So they kind of ban those and they're much more stringent. So I'm like, why can't we do that here? And when I looked it up, there was a great school in London that had decided they were going to get rid of those puddings that aren't needed and offer just fruit. And actually it made the students concentrate more and things. So it was anecdotal, but I think, so in terms of prevention, there's things we could do that are not that hard. And also thinking about the free school meals issue and children not being fed properly, malnutrition should also be at that, because unfortunately obesity is associated with deprivation. So actually, even though we're giving these children free school meals and they're eating, which is great, and they've got food, they're also malnutrition because they're not getting the foods that they need because it's not good enough standards. But
yeah, that I mean, it's a really valid point. I mean, I was just as we're in my office, I was just looking here. So again, Australia link here. This is Belinda Smith, who runs a thing called the Root Cause, so standing for children's health. And Belinda is a former member of the gym I used to be at, and she launched this basically when her kids went to school. And she talks a lot about, so she trains schools in this and does recipes. But one of her main original things, this is from memory, was around the kids' lunchbox. And so like the standard lunchbox is white bread, it's chocolate, it's crisps, it's whatever else. And she kind of, she's got YouTube videos and everything around this. And as you can see on here, this certified instructor, we should get some research with Belinda because she's done some great stuff. She actually, I might get this wrong, you can read this, but from my memory, she and her family sold their house and bought like a massive bus, and they travelled around Australia in this big bus teaching different schools about what they should be doing. So people can kind of do this and make a difference. And this was one individual who's really tried to do this. And just looking on her site now, 140 different schools meeting 35,000 teachers, students along the way. So there's some impact out there. Oh yeah, Mad Food Science program. That's what she invented. So some cool stuff out there. Might have to speak to Belinda and see if we can speak to her about all this program, because that's a big issue. And we're slightly going off topic, but we're not, because this creates the problem, because children are building poor habits in their nutrition and poor habits in their PE, if I'm being honest. And that's an area that I'm looking into at the moment. So we can combine these powers and nutrition and exercise with children. From the research that I know, these habits that they build, they're building them for life. And you're playing the game at the top end now, trying to treat them, when actually, if we can do both and we can prevent it at the start, mainly starting through kids, is where we might need to be.
And the worrying thing is that in the UK, we've got the National Child Measurement Programme, which measures children in year R, so when they're 4 or 5, and then before they go to secondary school. And the prevalence of obesity just increased. And because of COVID, it was so much higher. And so the current obesity levels, which are around 25 to 30% in adulthood, have come from much lower childhood obesity. So actually, we're just going to get worse unless we do something about it.
Yeah.
And that's the scary thing and it's definitely becoming more of the norm that, I saw a great photo when I was a baby and on holiday with my parents, and everyone was slim in that photo. Everyone was slim. And that wouldn't be the case now. It would be, with 60% of the population living with overweight or obesity, it's not the norm now. And it is to do with the environment we live in. And
it is definitely not the norm. I'm a qualified PE teacher, And I did my teacher training back in 2004-5. And I remember this. I remember the first swimming lesson that I did, and the kids were all in the swimming trunks. And I was like, whoa, like I was shocked, because when we went swimming as kids, you know, there might have been one or two people who were slightly overweight, and, you know, looking back and reflecting now, they got picked on a little bit, or people laughed and whatever else. In this environment, there was one or two kids who I would have considered like normal, not overweight at all. They were the ones getting picked on and getting laughed at. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And I'd not noticed it. The kids with the shirts on and things, you know, they didn't look nothing. But when they went in the swimming pool, I was like, whoa, this is really bad. And that's 15 years ago. Well, nearly 20 years ago. So yeah, it's quite a while ago. So we've known about this for a while, and we've not been doing much about it. You talked about kind of the environment, and going back to where you are working at the moment, what could we do to assist in the areas that you're working at? So I think it's probably treatment, but it's also prevention in terms of changing people's environment.
Yeah, so we've got a great PhD student who's just looking at small change approaches to weight management. So she's called Henrietta. She's coming to her final year. And so she did an intervention where people just made 100 to 200 calorie changes per day. And that seemed to, it was only a 12-week program. It was very quick. People had to be overweight, so BMI of 25, but under 30. And they only lost 1.5 kilos more than the control group. But it was simple. It was a good strategy we could say to people, and it was only a feasibility study, so we can't say it's effective yet. But it was a simple strategy people could use. So just make small changes. In Sydney, I did a say no trial, because when I moved over there, I was trying to make friends and making food, and my professor said, no, Claire, I am not going to have that cake today. And so then say no became a thing. And actually it was really interesting, because we said say no to indulgences, and you don't actually realise how much you're having until you have to say no 7 times across the week. And then you're like, okay, I'm going to say no to that one. And just having the ability to say no was also really interesting, because if you're in a work environment, they're like, no, I'm on this research trial now, I've got to say no to that. So it was that accountability, being part of something and having a reason to say no.
I like that reason to say no. I like that, because that people can then go, even if they're not blaming you for being boring, they're going, oh, she's doing, okay, well, we won't pick on that. I like that. That might be one to bring.
Yeah, some of our clinical psychologists, I've got some information on them and how to say no to food pushers, which is really good. So I can share that with you. And yeah, it's working out whether your goals is more important than them feeling bad or anything, because you do get encouraged to eat. So
you do. And again, going to the NHS, my wife works in the NHS, and people always buy them sweets and chocolate, and you're on a night shift, and get into that as well. Night shift's not great for people, but there's constantly chocolate and sweets available, and that's, all they eat to get themselves through a night shift. So I actually talk about the NHS being like the least healthy place to work, which is a crazy thing, but I think is true. So in terms of these kind of prevention things and environment, I mentioned kind of circle of influence and people. It was interesting for you to hear that around the just say no. I quite like that. Having a little excuse there seems to add to that. What about the readily accessible food that is there? And like I just talked about chocolate and things like that. We had an incident, and I'll always remember this. I went to a personal training conference in Australia, and we had food at lunchtime, and they opened up the next part of the afternoon session, and then on stage was all the food that was left. Right, so there was everything that was available, including fruit and veg, and including cakes and whatever else. All that was left on this stage was the fruit and veg. And even as personal trainers, we'd and the excuse would be, oh, well, it's just easier. Well, it's not, because actually you don't even have to take a wrapper off that fruit and veg, and you still didn't eat it. So there's something more that's in that, and that's the psychology side of things. But going back to this environment, things are so readily available. Is there change that could happen around things that are readily available, especially for kids, but for everybody? What changes do you think we need?
Yeah, I would say, there's some people who are saying that ban junk food completely. I don't think we'll get there, but I think the ultra processed foods are very cheap. They're easy to get. So there needs to be something where they're not promoted, and it shouldn't be that fruit and veg is more expensive than your ultra processed food like crisps and cakes and stuff. But I was also doing some work with a person from MasterChef, so Greg Wallace. So he's created a program because he realised his weight management program. He realised people don't know how to cook. So he created a program that we're trying to evaluate to see whether actually if planning your meals in advance saves you money as well, because you planned your meals, there's no food waste, which we waste a lot of food in the UK. And also he had videos on how to teach people to cook, which I think is also really important. So people are de-skilled with it as well, because we've got easier options of the processed food that we can just grab from the freezer or grab a meal deal or something. So
it's a really interesting point, and I've sat and done maths on that with members before and things like that, and usually it does work out that, you know what, it is cheaper to do this yourself. And time wise, when you start factoring in people who are sales reps was often people. So so what do you do at the moment? Oh, well, I go to a service station, I do this. Well, how long is that taking you? And when you start adding up actually the time, when they're saying, I haven't got time, no, you're just choosing to use your time in a different way. And actually, you know, if you spend 15 minutes an evening doing this compared to driving to a service station, queuing to get food and getting it, actually the time's probably quicker doing this, and it's probably cheaper. It's just habit, confidence, or I like this Greg Wallace idea, because you get bored, don't you? You just go, I'm going to have a chicken sandwich or a chicken salad, and it's just bland and boring. But actually, when you know what you're doing and you learn, then actually it might be actually tasty as well.
He's got some great recipes on there. He does it with his wife, and I've looked at the program. So, and I like the idea of that we can. It's just, and for me personally as well, I was like, actually, I do need to plan in advance. I need to plan in advance, plan my food, and also stop this food wastage, because food is really expensive at the moment. And the NHS were really interested in this program because it might be cost savings.
Yeah.
So.
That's good. Just to kind of recap, because I could talk to you all day. You can probably tell that. I could talk to you about all of these things all day, and it's really interesting. I think offline we can have a chat about some of this stuff. But so overall, let's just have a little recap. The magic pill has arrived, but has it really? So the magic pill's good. I keep calling it the magic pill because I can't name these things. So what were the two called that you mentioned earlier?
So one is called Wegovy, which is semaglutide, and the other one is tirzepatide or something, and that's the newest one out, but that hasn't got approval in the UK yet. So,
and these are either out already with the NHS, maybe in the future. They've got some outstanding results, but they are combined with a lot of other things, such as behaviour change kind of therapy, that seem to be better than many of the other options out there when you combine this.
Yeah, they're very good. And for some people who have tried everything, it's a good start. It is a good start to do. But it will be expensive. You still have to make changes. So it's not as a magic pill as we think. We call physical activity, if it could be pulled together, a magic pill, don't we? Because it does have many wider benefits. So this, you have to remember that there will be side effects for some people. But it does help you to manage your weight. And especially if you've tried lots and struggled with your weight a long time, then it might be a good option.
Yeah, and other options as you go through those stages. I'm sure this is all available at. Can people find out more if they want to self-manage this at any places?
Yeah, the NHS has a weight management, Better Health. So if you search Better Health campaign, then that was created by Boris when he realised in COVID that he suffered more because he was living with obesity. So he commissioned lots of different programs. So there's the Better Health website. There is your GP, and there's lots of online programs you can go to. And even if you look at your local council websites, it does vary throughout the UK, but there is support on offer to help you manage your weight. There's also, if you want to try very low calorie diets, they do work, and people lose a lot of weight. And in a way, behaviourally, it's easy to do because they provide all the food for you. And then you have to learn how to reintroduce foods to your diet. And then there's just simple changes you can make. So small changes you can make to your diet. Try and change 100 to 200 calories a day and see how you get on.
I think that's a big thing. We talk in the gym about a diet that works for you.
Yeah.
So making those small changes, making the difference long term. And the final probably couple of pieces to recap on there around the maintenance of this being a huge factor, and potentially bringing exercise in there that may help there, having that support from lots of people. But wider things, not just treatment, talking about prevention. There's huge change that need to happen, whether that possibly through government and policy to change the kind of highly processed foods and the availability of these foods, but also, us taking some responsibility for ourselves. So if people like Greg Wallace are out there and just finding out some simple meals to cook for yourself, because you will save time and you probably will save money.
Yeah. If you search for Change for Life, it was a social marketing campaign many years ago it started, and there's still simple recipes on that website. So Change for Life and also it does focus on the kids as well and try and get hidden vegetables and things like that. So that's another one you can go for support.
Well, thank you very much for coming on. I think our listeners can tell I could talk about this for ages, so I won't carry on going on about anything. But I'm sure if anyone out there listening is really interested in any of these spaces, I'm really interested in this and can kind of pass you on to researchers at Loughborough. Claire's clearly very interested in this. But if you have interest in weight management, whether that be kind of nutrition, behaviour change, whether it be physical activity, come and speak to us, because there's so many passionate people here at Loughborough who want to make a difference to this, that hopefully together we can all try and make some changes.
No, definitely. And I'm always looking for patients and general public to take part and help shape our research. So I've got a funding application that's going to go in June, and that's about how do we help people to maintain their weight loss, which is really key. So we're doing lots of qualitative interviews with people and finding out what the programs do now for it. So if anybody wants to get involved, we would love to hear from you.
There we go. Anyone interested, get in touch. You can find Claire Madigan or myself, on our Loughborough website. Right, Claire, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Experts in Sport podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, then please contact me, Martin Foster, at m.foster@alborough.ac.uk. Thanks for listening. See you next time.